TNT.
Good for fans of justice and truth.
Today's News Talk. TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to this live broadcast. We're still now number one here at TNT, Today's News Talk. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. Great to have you with us, and great to have everybody in the TNT chat room. As we said before the break, we're going to move into international news here. Three big stories. We're going to hit them all one by one. We're talking about the ICC arrest warrants, the filings for the Israeli leadership. There's a few Hamas arrest warrants in there as well that might be due, and also Ukraine latest and the Iranian tragedy over the weekend to hit all these three and hit them hard. Freddie Ponton, independent journalist based in Europe, is joining us right now on the live link. Freddie, how are you?
I'm very good, Patrick. It's good to be on the show.
Let's get to the job at hand here. Freddie, ICC filings against the Israelis. There's a few for Hamas in there as well. What do you think?
Well, I think the situation was announced. I mean, we all were expecting this announcement. We just didn't know the shape of it and the contents of it. Now, the process is very simple. We can see the chief prosecutor, Ibrahim Khan, from the International Criminal Court, which basically is requesting with the pre-trial chamber number one, the issuance of a warrants for arrest for Bibi Netanyahu and Minister of Defense for Israel, Yoav Gallant. So a very interesting and a very interesting moment as well. I think really the takeaway from his message, I think he had a very long press briefing where he explained exactly the motivation behind his actions. And it was interesting to really see exactly what has been done to come to the conclusions that he had no other choice but to ask for these warrants. And it's very, very interesting because he very from the get-go, I mean, apart from addressing the warrant for arrest for the Hamas leaders and asking them to be obviously arrested, so that's going to be a bit complicated for that. But I won't delve into it because clearly, I think the Hamas, when they got involved with the October the 7th, they knew that there would be consequences. And this is something as a group, as a resistance group, you know that you will do anything to defend your land, your people. And along the way, it's going to be very hard to stick with international law. So, when you're all in, and which is pretty much what October the 7th is, it's a really big move, probably the biggest that the Hamas has ever got involved in. And I think they knew exactly where they were stepping in, and I think they already knew that sentence will come at some stage. So there's no surprise there. But on the other side, and on the other hand, I think everyone in the world, the international community was holding its breath as far as understanding the ICC position. And it's pretty clear, Patrick, here that the ICC considered the actions of Israel as criminal under international humanitarian law. And the way Ibrahim Khan is describing them is as crimes and as war crimes and crime against humanity. These are very strong language. And I think it's very interesting because, of course, for those like us and many others that have followed this crisis for the past 7 months and even before, we know that October the 7th is only a very small part of what we are looking at here. And he's really describing the crimes. So he's really gone to great extents to explain his decisions and explain that Israel is accusing Israel to intentionally causing death and starvations, as well as great suffering and serious injury to body health and civilian populations. And I think that's really described pretty well what is going on. Now, he hasn't used the term genocide because the ICJ is working on that and is an open case. So I think he stayed away from the terms. But everything that he's describing is something that you will find into the genocide conventions. As war crimes and crime against humanity. So all these actions, hindering the entry of help into Gaza and the food and creating starvation. This is a very important clause within the Genocide Convention. Sorry. So very interesting. I think it was a very bold move. And then I think also I appreciated, Patrick, that the fact that Khan as well made some kind of a subtle statements with regards to the letter issued by the U.S. senators, to the ICC that was issued, I think, about 10 days ago. And he said, and in his comments, it's very interesting, he said, I insist that all attempts to impede, intimidate, or improperly influence the official of this court, the ICC, must cease immediately, otherwise his office will not hesitate to act pursuant to Article 70 of the Rome Statute, if such conduct was to carry on. So what he's trying to say to the US senators is like, you're not only threatening us as judges, you're trying to influence an international court, but also you're threatening our families. And that's something that is simply unacceptable. And we will use all the legal instruments in our hands, to put you back in your place. So it's going to be interesting to see how the US is going to respond to that. But I think it was the right thing to do. Although I've always questioned Karim Khan's ability to use the courts for what it was created for. But I think clearly on that stage, I think he had no other choice to take that position. So well done on that for that.
And on that issue of, as you mentioned earlier, Freddie, about Hamas, three Hamas officials, two militant leaders, one political leader in Doha is named in this as well. Now, Dan Kovalik is an international human rights lawyer. He's American. He's a former lecturer and academic at Pittsburgh University in the law department. He released a really, I think, excellent video explaining the international law status of what Hamas has done, actually, and the fact that they're in this indictment. It's not what I thought. It's actually another way of looking at this. I want to play this right now, and I want to get your commentary on his analysis. Go ahead and roll this clip.
So quite exciting happenings from the International Criminal Court, the ICC, today, which is based in The Hague in the Netherlands. It has issued arrest warrants for President Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, his defense minister Gallant, and a leader of Hamas as well. What a lot of people may not know is how did the ICC get jurisdiction in this case? Because many people may know that Israel is not a party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Neither is the U.S., by the way, even though both countries love the ICC to go after their adversaries. But you know who did sign on to the Rome Statute of the ICC? Hamas. And in fact, Hamas said that they are willing to fully cooperate with the ICC in any prosecution of its leaders. And this is an interesting fact, because, of course, Israel and the U.S. are saying, oh, they don't recognize these warrants. This is outrageous. They're not going to cooperate. In fact, some U.S. senators threatened before the warrants were issued that if they were issued and if Israeli leaders were arrested and sent to the Hague in the Netherlands, the U.S. would invade the Hague to free those people. So it's Hamas, in fact, that is more the party respecting international law than the U.S. or Israel. And that's what makes the case very interesting. But also what makes it exciting is that really this is the first time the ICC, since it came into effect, I think in 2002, if I'm not mistaken, so well over 20 years ago, that it's actually gone after high-ranking Western leaders. Up till now, the ICC has only successfully prosecuted African leaders. In fact, some people disparage it as the International Court of Africa. And now the ICC is showing maybe it's willing to actually apply the law equally to the countries of the North and the South, to the powerful countries and the weak alike. So we shall have to see.
Freddie, what do you think of that one?
Yes, look, it's well known. I knew about the Palestinian Authority being, signatory to the Rome Statute, but Hamas, of course, is as an administration, as a government, might have made the move. much check on that. But if that is true, then it's becoming very interesting because Hamas is going to have a large panel of articles within different treaty, and especially also some resolution that they're going to be able to build upon their case, especially United Nations resolutions, which clearly define the occupied territory as occupied territory, which means that under the fact that the Hamas and the Gaza was under occupation, it clearly means that they have the right to defend themselves by any means. And the only aspect is that this has to be done according to international law. Now, as we see in many of the hostages, in many of the people that were taken out on October the 7th, a lot of them are military personnel. And those that are hostage today, under these terms, are prisoner of war. So there's no breaking of international law here. And as far as all the claims, the exotic claims that were made by the IDF and the Israeli governments and Zaka, this so-called international entity, a lot of this was debunked. A lot of these claims of sexual abuse, of pregnant women has been completely opened up, and all this crazy things that was claimed happened to be not true. And you know that when you see 7 months later the Associated Press coming up with eventually some kind of clarity, and they've been very narrow in their investigations. They've only taken 2 cases and explaining that all that was fabricated and taken on the international stage to influence the international opinions, if you will, with regards to the gravity of the situation. Now, no one has absolutely, as I said, denied that the Hamas attacked Israel, and this was planned. There's nobody's put that and debating that. But I think we really need a full independent investigation on really the events surrounding October the 7th, because more I'm looking into it, and less it's making sense. So that's going to be interesting to see how Hamas also is going perhaps to release some of the footage, some of the documents, some of the informations that they've kept, for themselves until now.
Yeah, the discovery phase of that, their lawyers, if they're sharp,
That's right.
There's plenty of exculpatory evidence that would really render them innocent of some of these charges that have been put out in the media, like you said, by the Israeli government and this kind of fraudulent organizations like Zaka, these sort of fake first responder organizations that turned out to be corrupt and mired in all sorts of financial and sex scandals within Israel itself. Not exactly credible, to say the least. Now, moving on a related topic here, recently, in the last, I would say, 2 days, Norway, Spain, Ireland all make major announcements recognizing Palestinian statehood. What do you make of this? And it certainly provoked a reaction from their critics.
Yeah, I think we all 3 countries were working together and coordinated these efforts. And I think it's great that this morning I wake up basically listening to Prime Minister Jonas Thor, Prime Minister of Norway. And it's interesting to see the reason behind the decision to recognize a Palestinian state, And what I was really surprised is that this is really going to happen basically next week. So it's an immediate decisions. And on the 28th, next Tuesday, we're gonna see basically an official declaration. So it's of course a overdue perhaps, and it's interesting to see that for them they have different reasons why they're doing it. And as far as the Norwegian is concerned, they're doing it because Norway wants to show that they support the Arab peace plan, and the Arab peace plan is going to be presented on Sunday, actually. By Prince Faisal of Al Saud from Saudi Arabia, who's coming to the European Council to meet all the foreign ministers of the European Union. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all going to fit in. And then, of course, for Ireland, I think Ireland went back into their own history, and certainly relate to what it is to be occupied. So I think for them, it's almost a moral duty, if you will, to address this problem from that point of view and say, look, we know exactly what it is. And we too required the international community to step up so that we could be independent. So of course, there are the obviously the obvious countries to step up in that sense. And I think the statement from Irish Prime Minister and as well as the Irish Prime Minister Simon Harris was very eloquent, and I think it was touching the right points as well in terms of not just doing this for the show, not another promise, but really about helping moving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to resolution through a two-state solution. Because we hear all the time that these people wants to get, and many states say, oh, we want a two-state solutions, but what do you actually do to make it happen? So that's a really concrete move. And then it also was interesting because he announced that there was not only 3 countries in this kind of momentum, if you will. There was many countries in European unions that also are entertaining this possibility to join them in recognizing a Palestinian state. So I hope France is going to be amongst this country personally, because they've always had a strong stance on the Palestinian cause and always kind of wanted to have a two-state Palestinian. So this is their opportunity to do that. And I think we're going to see many countries. It's going to have a snowball effect, if you will, diplomatically and politically. And then the Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, also came into the equation. He didn't make it to the meeting, but early in the Parliament session this morning, he came out and basically very quickly announced that on May 28th, he will also recognize a Palestinian state. So all that, I think, is the heart is at the right place above the politics. I think there is some moral compass here that we can recognize. And I really know, and I probably hope as well, that other countries would, as I say, we discussed that on many occasions in other shows, but we knew that at some stage, countries will face internal political pressure, if you will, in terms of domestic pressures, asking for the states to take a position, a strong stance, not against Israel, but simply a strong stance to support the two-state solution. So that's an invitation for them to do that. And of course, politically speaking, France is obviously very much looking forward to the European elections. So Macron is kind of also have to look at his image and what he's saying and what he's doing. And all this has been scrutinized at this moment in time. So it's important for him to take that opportunity and get on board. So we'll look forward to that in the next few weeks to see where we're going to be.
And the Spanish Podemos party leader, Ione Belarra, she made a very strong statement. Basically said, quote, beyond symbolically recognizing a state of Palestine, we need to concrete actions to stop the genocide. That's interesting because you got left-wing populism, left-wing populist leaders. This issue has given them a platform to take a sort of strong position on a major foreign policy story, and this is happening in different European countries. So it's funny how an issue in the Middle East has basically affected the political dynamics of a lot of different Western countries, and has kind of in a way rebalanced things slightly in terms of giving platforms to parties that were marginalized or struggling to really connect with the public previous to this. So that I find that to be an interesting interesting development, Freddie. Another big issue is Ukraine. Obviously, things are moving very fast in that department. Russia's counteroffensive in the northeastern city of Kharkov is underway. It's taken a lot of people by surprise, not least of all the Ukrainian armed forces and NATO, who seem to be ill-equipped and ill-prepared to deal with it. Freddie, on this front, how do you think things are shaping up right now vis-a-vis Ukraine?
Well, France is obviously in a quiet mode, if you will, and we all saw them being the ambassador Levy being pulled in by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I think that although we were not really told what was discussed, but we can get a sense from it, especially from the late statement today from Artem Studenikov, an official from the Russian Foreign Ministry, which said that France basically sending troops to Ukraine will trigger a Russian response, that will not only be political. So I think it couldn't be clearer than that. And I think this is probably the terms and the nature of the conversation they had with the French ambassadors to tell them, look, we'll let you go away with a couple of, announcements and, but I think they just draw the line in the sand and they say this is as far as we can tolerate your kind of inflammatory comments. And I think there's even more to that. I believe that. And if you remember, at the early part of this conflict, there was an announcement that senior NATO officials were killed in a bunker near the Azovstal, foundry. So we know that there is a strong possibility that already maybe French military or via perhaps the NATO umbrella might have been caught, might have been killed, or might even have been captured by the Russians, but they kept that under wrap. So entertaining the possibility that perhaps the Russians have used that as a leverage, and they leverage that option saying, look, you've told the world that you have no presence here, but we might have had actually prisoners, wearing, the French flags or the French uniforms. We know the French legions have 200 Ukrainians as well, which many of them were dispatched on their own willing, if you will, to Ukraine to fight alongside the Ukrainian army. So the possibilities are ample, if you will, for a mistake, someone being captured, someone being killed. Anyway, that evidence might be available to the Russians. And I wouldn't be surprised they leverage that and say, look, if you're going to go and carry on doing this on national television in France, making plans on how they're going to, support and create a green line to protect the Belarusian border, the possibility of developing and deploying troops from Romania to secure Odessa as a city, all that is just too much, I think, and clearly, if it is the case, and if I'm right, and there are and have been some special operative under NATO banners or under the French banners in Ukraine captured, this is a declaration of war, if you will. So I don't think, of course, Russia wants to entertain that, but I think they probably reminded the French governments that they will not accept and tolerate any more inflammatory comments. And then since then, it's been very, very quiet. So that's what I'm seeing at the moment is that. So the whole idea of deploying troops, as I say, this is something that is really kind of exotic to me because we know the French army can only deploy 20,000 troops anyway, which will not change basically the outcome of this war. And then on the other side, we've gave already 40% of our arsenal, the Caesar cannon, all the artillery, all the shells has been depleted already. So we gave a lot. And I don't think today we're prepared to a high intensity kind of warfare against Russia. I mean, I don't see that happening from a military point of view. As a possible support, I think Macron keeps on saying that this is something that questions that he wants to address, and simply because the Russians are moving forward as well. So if they manage to go all the way down to the Dnieper River, this will be a serious threat for Kiev. And I think that what Macron is saying is that if Kiev is asking us, if they're losing control of the battlefield or some form of large control of the battlefield, then maybe Kiev will ask France to come to the rescue. And what Macron is saying is that what we do, are we prepared to come to the rescue, and what will be our position if should that scenario occur? So this is where France is a little bit kind of unstable and a bit shaky about what should be done. And I think other nations, NATO members as well, are a little bit cautious about that. And there's absolutely no consensus, if you will, as far as putting troops on the ground. So I don't see that as a real, purely realistic threat. I think it's really political, it's diplomatic, it's everything but a real threat. And the Russians are very serious about tackling it if it was to come to fruition.
The other thing that's happened, Freddie, this week is, well, there's been a lot of threats towards, saying we need to attack targets in Russia. There's a lot of people screaming about this right now in the U.S. All sorts of crazy stuff's being pushed. They're trying to pass bills. It's a very mad time. Russia's basically called their bluff. And today, they started the first phase of their tactical nuclear drills. I think we have some footage. If we go ahead and roll that we'll talk over the footage, but we have stuff that's been released from the Russian Ministry of Defense here. If you can see that, Freddie, this is in the northern territory of Russia. And there's also going to be drills that are going to be taking place in the territories bordering Ukraine as well. So this isn't going to be remote. This is going to be very much in the theater, as it were. So the first and second phases of these drills, and they're going to include the deployment of real nuclear warheads here. And so they're basically drilling with the new Iskanders, the hypersonic daggers, and basically going through a rehearsal, Freddie, here of moving the warheads that range from 5 to 50 kilotons. Just to give you an example, the 50 kilotons, 3 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. These are the tactical nukes, everybody, just so you're clear on this. And so they're sending a message to NATO, Freddie, aren't they? A very strong message here.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the idea is very clear. The Russians are not playing any longer, and I think they made it very clear that they are now at war. This is not any longer an SMO, a special military operation. This is really a war, and it's treated as a war, and Ukraine is the enemy. And anyone that's going to come and interfere with that battlefield is going to face the full strength of the Russian Federation army. And we all know that their military capacity is far beyond what we even probably aware of. They've definitely mastered the supersonic technology. And as far as the military tactical arsenal, it's really a huge power. And that's what Russia is: a serious contender, is a serious enemy, and nobody should be kind of playing around. You're not dancing when you're dealing with Russia because of their capabilities. And I think they're just trying to, it's a show of force, of course, and it's part of the war effort, if you will, is to show that we can do that, so think twice before doing stupid things, because we just right at the border, we can entertain during their war, they can entertain military and nuclear drill. That's how powerful and that's how equipped and organized they are. So they must be taken very seriously. And anybody that doesn't is a fool.
Yeah, they do have the capabilities here. They've also got the territorial size, Freddie, where they can do all these things simultaneously. They have incredible resources. And they're basically saying to the West, to NATO, we're ready. We're ready to go all the way. You're pushing us to the edge. We're ready to go to the edge. And really saying, are you ready to go to the edge, is what they're saying to NATO. And I'm not sure if people in Europe know the answer to that question, quite frankly, Freddie. I mean, certainly they talk tough, don't they, in the U.S., in Britain, but I don't see that tough talk in Central Europe. Is it because they have more to lose than those guys in Washington, Freddie?
Well, definitely. I think, there's just too much politics into that. So you really have to take it with a pinch of salt. Every statement is crafted, it's been scripted, and it's according to not only an international policy point of view, but also scripted according to they're talking to their voters. The elections is looming in the United States. You get European elections in Europe. So a lot of things politically is happening, and I think everyone is looking at taking a stance outside of the NATO realm, if you will, and saying, starting to calculate their move and trying to understand that everything they say has been scrutinized not only by Russia but by the voters on the ground. That is looking at it and saying, what's in there for us, because you can debate, you can perhaps lure people believing that sending money and equipment to Ukraine is important, is vital, it's a matter of national security. But when you start to talk about nuclear exercise and tactical nuclear equipments being deployed at the border of Ukraine, people are starting to think that, and they understand that this can basically now it can hit you home, and that's changed the complete way of thinking, if you will. This is the dilemma that you need to face as a general, as an admiral, as a head of a chief of staff for your country. You need to think about everything you do can have a direct consequence, because these kind of capacities go far beyond just hitting Ukraine. And if you become a belligerent in this conflict, it's open bar. So that's why I think we're going to see a little bit more caution about what people are saying. And I think Russia is definitely displaying its deterrence capabilities, and people are listening for sure.
Yeah, and there are people are going to ask inadvertently, Freddie, going to ask the obvious question: why are we fighting this war if they end up in a war? For what? The honor of Zelensky, or for Joe Biden? Or it doesn't make a lot of sense for Europeans, quite frankly. There was no war to begin with until the U.S. and its allies insisted that Ukraine be used as a cudgel against Russia, from the Maidan coup to the present day. Listen to this: the U.S. House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence issued a bipartisan letter to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin urging the Biden administration to allow Ukraine to strike military targets inside Russia. This is from the House Permanent Select Committee. This is one of the top committees in Congress. Dear Secretary Austin, we write in our capacity as U.S. House of Representatives to convey our strong support for several urgent requests on behalf of our Ukrainian colleagues. And they go on to basically detail F-16 strikes, various other fighter bombers hitting targets in Russia. I mean, Freddie, this is the thing that Russia is warning them about, and this is why you're having nuclear drills right now in Russia, and you get this at the same time. So this is quite crazy what's going on right now. There's no effort at all for diplomacy, not a word. All we see is escalation and escalation on top of escalation. I mean, are they gonna get their war eventually, Freddie? Because it looks like they're not gonna give up on this. They're going to take it to the very end. It really is frightening. Your comment.
It is threatening, but I look at the capacities and how you have to look at the military reality. What can actually the United States or NATO can do to create to change the outcome of the war in Ukraine. And the reality is that even the United States couldn't fight a long war, a kind of a high contact kind of intensity kind of war, simply because you need to have shells, you need to have artilleries, you need to have all these ammunitions, which the United States is running out because they've given so much, and the manufacturing mechanism behind is just simply not up to scratch. So no one is going to war if you can't get that supply, that logistics, and that that manufacturing in place to support your war effort, something that Russia's done, and they have this capacity to produce shells in high numbers and capability of replenishing even their tanks and so on. So there is a real war machines. There's a war industry behind it that is ready, where in the United States, none of that is ready. So how do you actually go out there? You can sign all the letters and ask, all the committees you want about, what should be done, and send you F-16s and all that. But you're dealing with a country that has a very strong air force, that has a huge technology, defense technology as well, air defense technology, probably one of the best in the world. And you're dealing with the countries that have huge nuclear deterrence capabilities. So logistically, NATO is not prepared yet, although they've been training and all that kind of things, they've been doing for years now to be interoperable. But at the end of the day, the reality of the ground is you're facing an army that is extremely trained. As I say, if Russia was to push is the deployment. They could easily go to 1.25, maybe 4 million people engaged in this war. So that's just not a small army to deal with. Plus, as I said, the warfares and the battles are fought completely differently than what we previously were accustomed to. With all this new technology, these drones, these unmanned aerial vehicles. Everything has changed. And I think that you cannot just change your strategy in about a year and a half time, reevaluate, train, and having actually people that can operate efficiently on the ground. So as I say, logistics, the manufacturing is not there. The US can write any letters they want and, do what they've always do, which is basically sending threats. But this is not Iraq. This is not Syria, or this is not Libya. We're talking about Russia, and this is a real serious enemy. And this will be absolutely foolish. And as I said, there will be a political cost to pay should this go ahead, because I can tell you domestically, people are going to start to ask the hard questions. And it doesn't matter which camp you are. When you start to feel that you're putting your country in danger, a lot of people are starting to be like, hey, where are our leaders taking us? And we're asking ourselves this question in France. Many countries and NATO members are starting to talk about, the real value in being part of NATO. Are we actually fighting an existential threat, or this is more about geopolitics and big box? What is it? What's in there for us, and how this, is going to lead us, and would that affect our bottom line as a citizen, our safety, our national security? Because everything is far away. Even me in France, I don't feel there's a war just around the corner. All I hear is like fighter jets, flying above my house on a regular basis. This morning there was so many, but these are just noise and training and rehearsing and deployment. But this is not war. War is when the shells are starting to fall on your street. That's war. That's, you understand. And we're not even talking about nuclear.
And fun fact: if Ukraine was in NATO, was a NATO country, it would have the largest army in NATO, the largest number of soldiers, and the biggest budget in NATO. And look where it's at after 2 years of that. It's been crushed by the Russians, and the Russians haven't even gotten started yet. So that should just put that in perspective. If any NATO countries think that it's a good idea to go toe-to-toe with the Russian Federation, probably not a great idea. I'm not even talking about the nuclear weapons. I'm just saying conventional warfare. That's just a little fun fact for Europe. Let's get real, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we only got a couple minutes left. The Iran story, Freddie, just take us away there. What have you observed? What do you think is worth knowing with this great tragedy that happened over the weekend?
Well, that's really an interesting story, and I think everybody was shocked in a certain way, if you will, by what happened. What we know is basically the Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi was heading towards the inaugurations of the Kiz Kalasi Dam in Azeri, and there was a high-level diplomatic delegations, and the Azerbaijan President Ilham Aliyev was also in attendance. What's interesting is that this is not the first dam they're inaugurating. They've had 2 dams already, and these countries have had a tumultuous relationship. But we also realize that these countries are trying to work together simply because they are natural regional partners. So the only things that creates and bring tension into the relationship between Azerbaijan and Iran is the relationship with Israel, because Israel is a big customer, and Azerbaijan has been buying for many years a lot of weaponry from Israel. And in exchange, of course, there is a major oil deals in between Azerbaijan and Israel. I mean, last January, we're talking about $300 million contract. So this is basically Israel is the number one customer for Azerbaijan. So these are created tensions. You remember in 2023, the attack on the Azerbaijan embassy, gunshots, and all that needs to be put behind. And I think Raisi was the man that it was. He was not a man of many words, or someone that has a huge charisma in front of the camera, but diplomatically, he was a master. He was absolutely amazing at really recreating, rebuilding this relationship. We have him on the Saudi side, normalizing this relationship, using the umbrella of the BRICS to normalize this relationship. You have him on the other side, meeting in Pakistan, and we're going to see a lot more coming together in between Iran and Pakistan's coming together. That's for sure. And we can see already the Supreme Leader of Iran mentioning that he's going to build upon Raisi's work in Pakistan. And then, of course, he's pushed Iran in the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation as well, and into the BRICS. So, I mean, for someone very discreet, he's achieved a lot, and diplomatically speaking. And this was, again, an exercise that is done very well. The story about the air crash and the helicopter air crash, we're starting to get a glimpse on what happened with the Major General Mohammad Bagheri, the Chief of Staff of Iran, which basically was part of the convoy. 3 helicopters basically were involved, the presidential helicopters, and 2 helicopters in support, traveling in convoy. They left at noon, basically, the dam site, and then they were heading back to the city of Tabriz, and they were flying basically over the mountains, because this is a mountainous areas. There was no bad weather. We can see that we can hear in the late interview of Bagheri saying that the weather was okay. There was no fog or rain, but in the valley around the mountain, there was a couple of clouds. They had to basically go above the cloud, like you will do when you fly helicopters, to avoid turbulence. And they basically started gaining altitudes, but for some reason, the presidential helicopters stayed down and went down. So obviously an investigation has been launched into the matter. What's really interesting is that in the airplane, you not only had the president, but you also have a very strong delegations, with Hossein Amir Abdulrahman, the ministers as well. So big delegations. You have the Imam of Tabriz also in the equation.
Yeah, and the foreign minister, very popular as well. Great tragedy for Iran. As Freddie said, investigations underway. They're withholding any speculation or comment until that's complete. I dare say we're probably going to learn some interesting things at the end of that. Freddie Ponton, LFC News Media. Follow him on X, Twitter. Thank you for joining us on TNT this week.
My pleasure.
There he goes, folks. Top of the hour news headlines coming up.